in 1980, turn of the century, the entering of the 15th century Hijrah, 1979, 1980. There was an incident in Mecca. I wrote about it in my tafsir of Surah Hujurat. Some of you may have read about it. A lot of people thought that it was this or that or the other, etc. I tried to give some clarity as to the facts behind the events. That information is not from hearsay, because I lived those events. I was there. I knew Juhayman personally. I sat in his house. I studied in circles with him. And I know that he was a righteous brother, one fearing Allah, and others. I lost three very good friends from America. Two were converts from the United States, from Washington, from Bermuda, living in Canada. A brother who was of those who gave me Shahada when I accepted Islam, died in Mecca. A third young brother, 18 years old, Hafiz Quran, from Guyana. Those people who got caught up in those events were people who were very sincere about Islam. They studied Islam, studied Quran, studied Hadith, etc. In the early days of the movement, before it was deviated, we used to travel out into the desert, visiting villages like the Jamaat Tabligh. Go out, Khuruj. We'd get a GMC and 10 of us, whatever, would head out. We'd take with us Mukhtasar Sahih Muslim, and we'd study it, memorize the hadith on the way. We weren't reading Tabligh Nisab, we were reading Sahih Muslim. Okay? So it was different. So we'd stop off at a village, and one of the brothers would get up, he would lead Salah, and after the Salah he would talk to the people, invite them back to the Quran and Sunnah. Would spend time sitting with some of the local people in villages and teach them Quran. Many of them could hardly even recite Fatiha. I know it might seem very strange to you. How? Arabs live in Saudi Arabia? Out in, small villages, you find people bumbling in Fatiha. So we sat to them. This is how it was in the early days. However, an element came in. An idea came in. People started to feel, because the group used to try to put into practice all of the forgotten sunnahs, bring them back to life. This is part of the way of the righteous, that they bring back alive the sunnahs of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ which have died. Everybody used to fast every Monday and Thursday. But what started to happen is that as more people joined, and people were from different levels and different, understandings, those who were fasting started to look down on those who weren't. Like fasting on Mondays and Thursdays became a criterion to distinguish between the true believers and the half-baked Muslims. It's good to fast on Mondays and Thursdays, but it should not become something which starts to make you feel elevated over other people. Dangerous. Shaitan is introducing concepts now. Pride coming in. Praying with your shoes on. This is the sunnah, which was at that time dead. Nobody knew about it anymore. Only the few studying in University of Medina and other universities who read hadith came across these things. Very few people knew about it. So, in the masjid where we were, we used to gather in what is known as Har al-Sharqiyya, the eastern part of Medina, which was near where the lava beds were. Housing was cheap. A lot of the students used to go out there. We had masjids out there, gravel floors. So we used to pray with our shoes on. Alhamdulillah. Well, some of the local people, it's quite strange, but we educated them. They got to understand it and accept it. However, after that, some of the brothers felt that they had to implement the sunnah in Masjid al-Nabawi and Masjid al-Nabawi. Now, Masjid al-Nabawi is no longer gravel as it was in the time of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I'm sure you all know that. There are nice carpets all over. And when you go down the front line, you'll see all these Pakistanis, Afghans, and others just sitting. Every salah they're always there praying in Masjid. So now, when these young brothers, very sincere about bringing back to life this sunnah, started to walk in the masjid with their shoes on, of course, these brothers sitting in the front rows, they couldn't deal with it. What is this? People are coming to desecrate the masjid of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I asked them, please don't do this. Get out, take your shoes off. They said, this is sunnah. No, this is not Islam. Islam, you must take your shoes off. Because that's all they knew. And of course, fights ensued. Muslims fighting Muslims over whether you can pray with your shoes on in the masjid or not. Of course, those people inside the masjid were the majority. So eventually they got those people and threw them bodily out the masjid. Now the brothers felt, well, alhamdulillah, we struggled, made some kind of jihad there for the sake of bringing back the sunnah. And the people in the masjid felt, alhamdulillah, we protected the masjid and Nabawi from the desecrators. What happened, a series of other incidents like this started to build up. So, some teachers, professors from the University of Medina came out to the Har al-Sharqiyya to talk to the brothers, to advise them. I remember sitting and listening to one of the sheikhs. His name was Shaybatul Hamd. And he was explaining to them that wearing the shoes is sunnah. Not wearing the shoes is sunnah. You can wear the shoes here in Har al-Sharqiyya where it's gravel. Nobody's going to question. But in Masjid al-Nabawi, to try to wear the shoes there is not the correct methodology of da'wah. You must educate the people first before you can introduce something like this. Otherwise, you're creating fitna. You're creating fitna. Muslims fighting Muslims. When the Shaykh gave that explanation, I had to open my eyes. Because I was behind them too. Let's get those shoes on in the masjid. Okay. But when he gave that explanation, it made sense to me. Yeah, really. Now maybe we are going out on a limb here. Because I can still pray with my shoes out here. I'm fulfilling the sunnah, and I take my shoes off in Masjid Nabawi, I'm also fulfilling sunnah. No problem. And about half of us understood and accepted the advice. The other half expressed the idea that this was a government scholar. This is a government scholar. Can't trust him. Who's paying his salary? The government. And the government is not in, they're not applying Islam properly in the country. We cannot trust this government. We cannot trust anyone who's in the pay of the government. Matter of fact, many of those who held that position, they had quit Islamic University of Medina. They quit studying there and had pulled out to form their own circle to study individually. The others who remained in the university, like myself, we were the ones who understood and accepted that difference. But those who had pulled out of the university, they stopped going to university because university, they used to give us stipends. Where is the stipend coming from? From the government. So what is the value of this education anymore? Useless. We cannot learn from these people. So at that point, there was a split. Personally, when I heard those others take that position, I felt something very negative is going to happen. So I myself stepped back, along with a number of others. And sure enough, that segment ended up going out into the desert, forming their own community, where they're going to apply Sharia, but, of course, without the benefit of any kind of knowledge coming in from scholars from the outside. They cut themselves off from the scholars, only working with the books now. And working with the books in that community there, closed community, Shaitan put the idea, the turn of the century is coming. The time of the Mahdi. And people started having dreams that the Mahdi was coming. And at the same time, there was a young man in Riyadh, Muhammad al-Qahtani, Muhammad ibn Abdullah al-Qahtani, who was a very powerful orator. Third-year student in Sharia at Imam Ibn Saud University, known for his piety, who was drawing larger and larger crowds every time he gave Jummah. And in his khutbahs, he was indirectly pointing at the system, at the evils and the wrongs in the system, very subtly but pointing. Nobody missed the message. So the government moved to stop him, no longer giving any khutbahs in his masjid, then no longer giving any khutbahs in any masjid. And eventually he was obliged to leave. His tapes of his lectures had reached Medina. Students were well aware of him. Anyway, he was invited to join that community out in the desert between Medina and Mecca, where Sharia was being applied, and where dreams of the Mahdi were frequent amongst those who had closed themselves off in this. And sure enough, when he arrived, the sister of Juhayman, said that this is the one who I saw in my dream. And others confirmed, yes, he is the one who we saw in the dream. The Mahdi. At first, the brother Muhammad Qahtani, he refused to accept it. No, I'm not the Mahdi. I'm a scholar, I'm a student, Sharia, and No, he said, look, your name from Qahtan, pure Arab, from your description, large forehead. It is you. He kept trying to fight it off, but more people were saying, till eventually, he married Juhayman's sister, with his own wife, reinforcing it, and everybody around him, yes, you are, and you're a righteous man, everybody knows you're a righteous man, and he truly was a righteous man. I spoke to his teachers after in Riyadh. All they had to say about him was praise. But eventually he came to accept that he was the Mahdi. Then came the necessity of bringing to life the prophecy. Bay'ah had to be made at the Yemeni corner. So they gathered themselves. All of them, if you saw them, long beards, turbans, short thobes, You say, these brothers Salafi. They're trying to practice that Sunnah as close to the way of Prophet ﷺ as possible. Prayer marks on their foreheads from Tahajjud. They went into Mecca and they carried in with them arms. And with the turn of the century, they announced inside of the masjid, right after Hajj, that Bay'ah was being given to the Mahdi. And people inside, some of them not knowing anything about all of this, they saw the group, they saw this individual, and they went and made Bay'ah. People just come for Hajj, Afghans and others just came for Hajj, they went and made Bay'ah. Because not only were dreams of the Mahdi there in that little environment, but there were reports of it all around the Muslim world. People were speaking about it in America, in Indonesia, in Malaysia, and other parts of the Muslim world. So those people coming for Hajj, the word was there, the turn of the century, And you all know what happened after that. Once the system had been defined as a disbelieving system, the rulers disbelievers, and those who were in their pay, all disbelievers, then the blood of Muslims became halal. And they turned their guns on Muslims. Those who were guarding the Kaaba, were guarding the masjid, were systematically shot. And so on and so on.